Welcome to Q&A episode 2. If you guys want your questions featured in the next episode, leave them in the comments down below because I'm favoring the questions in the YouTube comments of the previous video for what I'll be using in the next episode. But of course, I'll probably open up my Instagram story for some more questions as well if needed. But the questions in the comments of this video will be what I'll be looking through first when I'm looking for questions for episode 3. So let's begin. This one is from Ricky103527. What are the 4 or 5 overdrive distortion fuzz boost pedals you would use to create a drive section that combines the best of Mayer and Frusciante? That's a really difficult one, but I thought a really interesting question. If you had to kind of combine the two, the only things that I really feel like carry some crossover between them would be some sort of boost pedal like the MXR microamp and the Keeley Katana, and then the kind of more tube screamer style of sound which John Frusciante is kind of embracing in the modern Unlimited Love Return of the Dream Canteen era with the Boss SD1, which I know is very tube screamer-esque. So I'd maybe say keep a tube screamer like a TS10, TS808 to cover kind of the light overdrive for the Frusciante stuff with the SD1 as well. Maybe do the Keeley Katana or some sort of preamp. Even like the Hudson Broadcast AP would be kind of a good like boost pedal that has a little bit more crunch. So let's do Hudson Broadcast AP actually, cover Keeley Katana in the microamp section for the boost side. TS10 covers the tube screamer Mayer thing, SD1 Frusciante thing. You kind of got to have the DS2 for the Frusciante thing as well for that heavier distortion. There's no real getting around that. And then if you're wanting a fuzz, maybe like a fuzz face style of pedal, which could kind of, do some sort of fuzz things for both like the Mayer Hendrixy fuzz stuff and then some of the Frusciante fuzz things too. That's a difficult one. That's a really difficult one, but if I had to choose kind of 4 pedals, maybe that's what I do. The Broadcast AP is pretty damn versatile too, so I think that would allow a lot of flexibility with tones you can get kind of out of one single pedal like that. Next one is from Jeremy BNZ. Great video. I have a question. What is your favorite solo on an album and favorite solo on a live performance? Tricky one, because especially for the live, I feel like that changes quite frequently for me and what I normally kind of keep going back to and listening to. For live right now, at least, it's probably the California Dreamin' solo that John did on Conan. I think that is so good. The studio part is tricky too because I don't really listen to a lot of John's actual albums. I'll always just listen to a YouTube playlist of live music or something. That's what I go to for my regular listening actually of music, but I'd have to say Assassin, I think, is probably my favorite studio solo that John has done. This one is from Slingshot. Please give some Univibe recommendations, especially where the light is type of tones. So John, for the Continuum era, for where the light is, used an original Chennai Univibe. So you want something that is pretty faithful to the original Univibe, I guess would be the most accurate sounding in that kind of context. I've never actually owned a Univibe pedal, funny enough. Yeah, I don't think I've actually owned a Univibe pedal, but if I had to search for some Univibe pedals just based off of, kind of what I know and what personally interests me, there are kind of 3 off the top of my head that I think would be pretty cool options to look into. First one being the Strymon Ultraviolet. I love that new series that Strymon is doing where it's the kind of more compact pedal enclosure, that new style, and then just more single effects in one pedal. I think it's really smart. I think they look great. The Ultraviolet would be a great option, I think. Then the Thorpe Effects ER2 is their take on a Univibe. Thorpe just makes really great stuff. I've never played a Thorpe pedal that was less than stellar. So just as always, when I think of different effects, Thorpe's version is one that I always kind of think of or comes to mind. I'm like, oh yeah, Thorpe makes a version of that, so it's probably pretty great. And then the Drybell Vibe Machine. John used one of those for the Search for Everything tour as well. So that one I don't believe is crazily expensive, but an option that John has actually used that you could check out, and there's a few different versions of them, but the Drybell Vibe Machine would be another pretty good option too that, you know, like I said, John's actually used. And there's a few ones out there that are, you know, more accurate replicas. I believe that, you know, people are really just trying to be faithful to the original Shinai. Like even MXR makes like a basic like Univibe pedal, right? But those three for me would be what, if I had to look for a Univibe to kind of do that stuff without doing like a ton of research on it, those are the three kind of off the top of my head that I'd probably go and start looking at first. Moving on to one from JTTO-S9Y. What humbuckers would you be putting into a PRS SE24 to get into the vibes of John's humbucker-equipped PRS guitars? Also, when he is using them, is he coil splitting, do you think? Now, the humbucker thing is interesting for John. I'll tackle the coil splitting thing first. No, I would really doubt that John is doing much coil splitting at all. Maybe with some stuff with Dead & Company. That's not something I've ever dived into that much in terms of the research or the tone specifically, but maybe someone like my friend Gabe Bergman or Ryan the Tone Geek are a bit more into Dead & Company. They can kind of give their thoughts in the comments down below if you guys do end up watching this video on what John might be doing. But in his own kind of music, I really doubt there'd be any coil splitting going on. When you think of humbucker PRS guitars, I'm mainly going to the Platinum, like silver finished 594. That was custom done for John. So John has custom pickups in there, but even going to like his SG Les Paul, his vintage one that he used, John's even used like an actual Les Paul back in the Continuum era a little bit for humbucker tones. Basically what he's going for is just a good PAF style of pickup. So if you're looking for something that gives you a good kind of vintage PAF style of sound for a pickup, I think Bare Knuckle makes a pretty well regarded one. Again, this is something I'm not super versed into, but I guess I just say no coil splitting. Don't worry about that because he's got his Strats and, you know, single coil guitars like the Silver Sky for doing that kind of thing. But then for the humbucker sounds, he's more just going for that classic PAF style of pickup. So really any good kind of PAF style of clone of a pickup, which I'm assuming if you're putting into an SC24, obviously you're looking at getting, you know, some sort of like humbucker to swap into there. Anything that's in that vein, I think, should do pretty well. I will say if you're looking for the best kind of PAF style of clone, I just did a little bit of looking online here. Ron Ellis does make two kind of PAF style of pickups, it looks like. The 50s LRP is a vintage accurate replica of the earliest PAF patent applied for humbuckers. All components were selected to faithfully recreate the famous sound heard in those early humbuckers. I mean, that's a pretty high-end expensive option, but if you're looking for the absolute best, at least if I was looking to go and buy a humbucker style pickup to throw in a different guitar, the Ron Ellis's are probably what I would personally pick. Moving on to our next one from Forbes3868 about the TS clones and not the Bonsai. Just trying to interpret this one a little bit. If I had to recommend a good Tube Screamer style pedal or clone, the Bonsai is probably the one I'd say at the top of my list. It's got the blend of just a very brilliant design, these multiple mode kind of multi-packed in one pedals that Josh Scott made are just all super brilliant, and John's even used the Bonsai a few times, so that'd be probably the one I'd recommend for the top of the clones. But if you're not looking for something that's a Bonsai, I would think the Keeley Noble Screamer seems like a very interesting concept, actually. I think that could be like a really cool style of pedal, and it looks really great too. Plus, then you get the ODR one thing as well from Nobles in that pedal, so it's another cool two-in-one style of pedal. I always like to recommend the Way Huge Green Rhino as well. I really love the vintage one, and the modern ones just kind of take that and, you know, change it up a little bit, add you some frequency as well with the little smaller knobs that are on there for like the frequencies and stuff like that, and I know a lot of people love the more modern green rhinos too, but if I had to just kind of push one to recommend, I'm probably just always going to recommend the Bonsai or even the JHS 3 Series Tube Screamer if you want a very affordable, just well-built Tube Screamer style pedal. That's a great option too. All right, this one's from the Stealth Operator 4138. How do you set your amp and pedal settings for Where the Light Is overdrive lead solo tones? I have a Blues Crab and TS-808, but still trying to figure out how to set them up. This is a hard one to answer without knowing your full rig, and the thing about pedal settings that I'll say is that it's hard to just take someone's settings and apply them to your own rig, because your guitar, your actual playing style, all take into effect of how everything's going to sound. The rest of the pedals in your chain, your amplifier settings, how loud you're able to play. That all takes into account of what your sound is actually going to sound like, for lack of a more eloquent explanation or description of that. My best advice would be to, set your amplifier for kind of how loud you want your bass clean tone to be, and then take your tube screamer and kind of set all the knobs maybe at noon, and then from there go for, okay, are you needing more gain, less gain, more volume, less volume? And just adjust things from there. And then when you stack your Blues Crab, which is like a Blues Breaker clone, into the tube screamer, there should be a noticeable volume jump with the gain stacking and a noticeable increase in gain. Now, the Blues Crab, I'm not sure exactly how the pots are compared to the Mark I Blues Breaker, but however you need to set that, where you're just getting a nice lighter style of overdrive, a little bit of crunch from the amplifier when it's on its own. That's kind of what you're aiming for. But the key thing with gain stacking is that your clean sound should be your clean sound. Sounds great. You stack on the first overdrive like a Blues Breaker, little bump in gain, little bump in volume. Tube screamer, bigger bump in gain, bigger bump in volume, and then the two of them together should give you that third level of both of them. So that's kind of what you should be aiming for with the sounds. I can't really give exact settings in just this kind of scenario, this kind of question, kind of answer style, but my friend Gabe Bergman did release a really great video on the tube screamer and kind of the tones for the Mayor thing and how to kind of get them with the tube screamer on his channel. I'll link it in the description down below. Go and check that video out. It's really phenomenal. Gabe did just an absolutely amazing job on it. One of my favorite Mayor tone videos on YouTube, I personally think. It's my buddy Gabe. He just, nails it every time, but that's a really brilliant video. Go and check that out if you want some kind of help and some ideas on how to better set a tube screamer. Gabe does a really good job of explaining it that way too. All right, moving on to some Instagram questions now. This one is from A.L. Gulcher. Do you like Telecasters? Yes, I'm a Telecaster fan. I've never really owned a traditional style of Telecaster before, but I've been definitely very inspired by people who play Telecasters. I think the first person who inspired me with a Telecaster would be Chris Shiflett with the Foo Fighters. He's played different Telecasters before, and it's kind of one of his main guitars, although his version isn't quite what you'd consider a typical Telecaster either with P90s or dual humbuckers like the kind of deluxes from the 70s. But I've been really interested in Telecasters lately, and I have a lot of... I got one actual Telecaster style on my mind that I'm really wanting to add to the collection. So I think that might be the next move for me actually in the gear space, would be maybe a Telecaster style guitar, but I'll leave it at that for now. And then, oh yeah, like Johnny Buckland, Coldplay, I really love as well, especially in kind of the earlier days. We still use his one now, but in the earlier days, what I consider the golden era of Coldplay, and I think a lot of people do, Johnny Buckland as well uses a lot of Telecasters. I like the thin line versions from the 70s too. Really cool guitars as well, but yeah, definitely something Tele style with a maple neck is something I'm really wanting to add to the collection, hopefully soon. Next question from Ryan Flack. Fave guitarists aside from Mayor, John Frusciante, and Ariel Posen. Those are kind of the top three-ish there. It's hard to say. I have maybe like a top six, I think. So Mayor, Frusciante, Ariel Posen are a given. Then let's add in Chris Buck, add in Johnny Buckland as well, and The Edge. That would be kind of like my three. That'd be my most rounded kind of inspirations in terms of guitarists and favorite guitarists. Pretty much always would be those six. This one's from Beatrice Talenti. Have you ever bought a Rogerlin Adrenaline pedal? Still waiting to hear those JM tones. I've tried one in the past and I just didn't like it. It's overly complicated. Sucks tone like nothing else. It was terrible. Like adding that into my signal chain, there was such a noticeable tone suck from that pedal, and it's kind of like a one-trick pony really, where it was like, all right, I just went online and kind of looked at what the settings were for Heartbreak Warfare, and then I was like, I played around with it and I was like, all right, that's cool, and then I immediately took it out of my chain, off my board, because the tone suck was terrible. This is a couple of years back now at this point, but yeah, I have no real plans to ever get one, just because I don't think they're that great, to be honest, and John doesn't even use them anymore. So yeah, won't be hearing any tones with a Rogerlin Adrenaline from me. This one is from Osane. I think, has Jam ever used the overdrive channel on his Jmod? As far as I'm aware, no. I'll always think that that was just a really weird addition to the design of that amplifier, something that I just don't think was totally necessary if you're putting Mayor's name on it. Why would you have something that John doesn't really use? So as far as I'm aware, at least, there's been no like instance of John ever using it. Maybe he's used it in the studio. That could be like the only thing I can maybe think of, is that John added it onto the amplifier, or the design, like the design team in collaboration with John, they threw that in there on the amplifier as something that maybe would be kind of a cool studio tool for John to maybe use. So possible maybe in the studio is the only real thing I can think of, but live I just see absolutely no reason, or there are no tones to me that would ever indicate that John would ever do that. Moving on to this one from Ian Richards 089, best alternative to the Dumbloid B. The Dumbloid B is an interesting one to try and find an alternative to, because it's so unique, because it's got that boost circuit in it, which is really brilliant, and then of course the kind of ODS Dumble inspired circuit to it as well. So it's a hard one to try and like fully duplicate, but if you're wanting something that's kind of like a Dumble style pedal, the Wampler Euphoria is one that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough. I've tried it out a couple of times. One of my good buddies has one, and it's a really great sounding Dumble style pedal. It's really great. The Gladio is one that I'm a really big fan of personally as well, whether or not it's the standalone SC or the dual. Both pedals of those for the Gladio from Cornerstone are fantastic as well. And then even if you're looking for something that's maybe a little bit closer to what Shin's actually would do, they did a collaboration with MXR a few years back called the Shinjuku Drive, which, you know, so it's discontinued now, but you can still find them, I believe, on Reverb for relatively reasonable prices. So that could be one to look into too, because it's a collaboration between the two companies. But as far as an actual like Dumbloid B substitute, I don't think there really, unfortunately, is one that would do the exact thing the Dumbloid does, but something like that. Or even you could look into a Mesa Boogie Flux 5 to kind of do the John Mayer third overdrive thing, because that's what he used during the North American leg of the 2019 World Tour. So something else you could maybe look at as well. I mean, Zen drives too, but they're pretty expensive, so it doesn't really feel great to recommend a Zen drive as an alternative, but that's another option, obviously. This one is from Tom, page 88. Can you get a Where the Light Is tone with a Clon? I mean, you can. Like, look at the Nordvang Gravity. That's a Tube Screamer and Clon style pedal, like 2-in-1 pedal, very much Continuum inspired tones, and it definitely does that thing. For someone though who's had some real experience with an actual Clon Centaur, Mark I Blues Breakers, those kind of pedals, the Clon to me does a bit of a specific thing when you use it, and the Blues Breaker just has it's almost like a warmer tone to it, if that makes sense. The Blues Breaker does something that the Clon just doesn't. It's hard to describe without having like the tones to compare it, but I just feel like the Blues Breaker does the Continuum thing better than a Clon. You can definitely get like a great Mayer overdrive sound with a Clon. It's just not quite the same when you have a Blues Breaker, and, you know, John using the Blues Breaker example for the bass tone of Gravity, just to add that little bit of extra grit and even just the feel under the fingers with that. And then you stack like a Tube Screamer on top of that, the Keeley Katana as well for some boost. That overdrive sound is just different compared to the Clon being in the mix. So you can, but I definitely am a lot more of a fan of just sticking to the Blues Breaker style pedal if you're wanting to just strictly be in the Where the Light Is vein. I think a Nordvang Gravity is probably your best bet for something though that is Clon-esque, that'll do the Continuum sound very well, because I think they probably, the way I just would interpret it is maybe they tweak kind of the sound so that when it's stacked together especially, you're getting a bit more of that Continuum lead tone versus the more modern John Mayer tones out of it. So that's something I'd maybe look into if you're looking for kind of some pedals to get you that tone, but with the Clon option, Nordvang Gravity would probably be where I'd point you in that direction at least. Next up is from Curtis Marshall. Could you give your opinion on best budget-friendly delay pedals for the longer kind of Mayer delay style? I'll always recommend the T-Rex Replica. It's so good. It sounds so great, and for the TES Providence Delay 80 sort of thing, it does it very, very well. It's, you know, not identical obviously, but it does that sound very, very well. The Chrono Delay does a good job of doing like the longer delay sounds too, but I think the Chrono's there's talk about the Chrono being discontinued, so I feel like I almost can't recommend that anymore, because I feel like the Providence Chrono Delay is on its way out. And just to throw in a couple more affordable options, the JHS3 series has a delay and then a tape delay that just released, I believe. So there's two kind of options there as well that could be very, you know, affordable for the price point, very well built, and will do the longer delay thing as well out of those options. So those two I'd shout out. And then if you want something that John has used as well, the T-Rex replay box can always be found for pretty reasonable, especially slightly used on like Reverb, and that's one John actually did use for a bit of the 2019 World Tour. So that's another really great option too. So some pedals for you to check out there, I think. This one's from Jay Plays the Strings. Will we ever see a resurgence of the John Mayer Gear Lounge YouTube channel? That channel was a lot of fun, and I love doing those kind of podcast style episodes with a lot of my friends in the Mayer Gear space. That was kind of also, though, the precursor to me actually making this channel. It was kind of like, all right, let's do more of a collaborative thing, was my thought process behind it, get some of my friends all involved, and we can kind of make some podcasty style videos and just see what people like. And then when everyone did, I was like, okay, there's something here, and I could have some fun making my own channel, because too, then it's on me to get everything done. Where before, when you make like a podcast or something, it's really hard to get everyone to sit down and actually to find the time to get everyone to be on board, kind of, you know, into the same topic, and kind of do a little bit of research on the topic beforehand, so we kind of know a little bit more what we're talking about going into it. And then to sit down for an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, it usually ends up being more because you have like a chat before, you film a chat after. For everyone to tee up, especially as all of our lives have just gotten honestly busier, I'm busier than I've ever been too and stuff like that, it's hard to get everyone to sit down. And then plus for me, it's running different YouTube channels and stuff as it is. Adding another one back into the mix is probably going to be a lot difficult. I love to do something like that again, maybe more casual kind of thing. But I think if you're looking for a true kind of podcast style of video, Tom Butuin does the Everything Mayer one, which is really fantastic. But I'd love to just do like a live stream or something with some of the guys and just do a chat and catch up and hang out on the channel. But as of right now, no real plans to resurrect that one, just because I don't think we all have enough time to really make it work, if I'm being honest. And our last one from Ethan Navarro. Can we get a history of the Monterey video? Yes, you guys can. Those videos just take a long time to make, and there's a lot of research and a lot of time and effort just goes into making those mini documentaries, where it's like, okay, let's find like an earlier performance of when John used it, like to try and pinpoint the earliest we've seen it. That takes a lot of time to actually try and sort out. And then same thing for the last time we've seen him use it is really difficult too, because you kind of got to go to a tour, the songs he would typically use for it, and then start from the end of the tour and work your way back until you find a performance with it to kind of indicate that's the last time John would have used it. So those kind of videos can be a little bit difficult, at least with the Monterey now. John's been using it a little bit more, so I don't have to worry about pinpointing the last time he's used it, because we just know. But anyways, these videos, just to give you some context, they take a long time to make, but they're my favorite probably that I do on the channel. So yes, that one is on my list of videos to make, and I have been working on it. So that'll be on the channel. I'm not going to say anytime soon, but, you know, stay tuned for it. It will be coming on the channel very soon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's Q&A. I'm just having a lot of fun making these videos too, just some extra content on the channel and answering some questions. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you want to have a question get answered in episode 3, leave it in the comments down below and try your best to leave it in a question kind of style where I can answer it decently off the cuff like this. I'll try and do some research if it calls for it for the question, but I don't want to do a ton, to be honest, because it's not really the intent behind these style of videos. But please leave it in the comments down below if you want your question answered in episode 3. Until the next one, you guys, thanks for all the submissions. There's lots of them, but to try and keep them, you know, in a decent time frame as well. Can't answer all of them, but I'll save some as well that I've got for the next episode if needed to. So appreciate all the submissions. Take care, guys. I'll see you on the next one.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.